let's get into why we're here today, right? So I think Dele really enunciated this very well, right? So the whole point is that we want to have the best potential native rails for AI agent economies to interact with Satoshis and to build on Bitcoin mainnet itself, right? And for that, there's so many things that haven't been built yet. And that's where, obviously, Hitachi, we have an 18-month R&D effort to kind of solve one key aspect of that, which is that natively programmable Satoshis, giving the ability for WebAssembly agents to directly manipulate that with their own sovereign onboarding and deboarding of Bitcoin. So what we really want to look at is this, right? Bringing autonomous AI to Bitcoin is going to require us to solve many hard problems. We're not talking about just having wrapped BTC or sidechain-based peg BTC being manipulated somewhere else on some other ledger. We're trying to see, similar to how Lightning allowed elliptical curve cryptography to have faster finality for payment channels, we want to now generalize that to having a few things happen. AI agents being able to onboard and deboard and have sovereign control over their own Bitcoin wallets, and then allowing them to have programmable smart contract-based interactions or WebAssembly-based code updates based on updates to the UTXO model of BTC itself. So I think before we get into everything else, we have to understand that the UTXO model has many limitations, but it also gives us a lot of opportunity so that we can finally natively allow sovereign compute and sound money to be combined. Right? This is a very important thing for all of us to think about. And for the kinds of folks who you feel that might really add on an R&D perspective to this, at the end of the call, would love for you guys to tell us then who can also join up in this research effort. Quick intro, Parth here, so founding contributor of Hitachi. So I also have Pumpkin Latte, the chief scientist. He's also in the call as well. What we've built is, for the last 18 months, we looked at everything that has been built from Lightning to Liquid to the Omni network, all the way to BitVM and rollups. And we found all of them failed for specific reasons to natively scale and make Satoshis programmable, either by wrapping or pegging or taking the Bitcoin to a separate sidechain or L2-based substrate, or using a federated or sequencer-based model, which again does not preserve the security of Bitcoin, right, on a very fundamental level. So what we found out is that using virtualized UTXOs, which we'll get to later, and a new proof mechanism that we created, we're able to use Bitcoin full nodes to power multi-runtime updates to the states of Satoshis, or multi-runtime execution, which includes WebAssembly code. And more importantly, we had to create a new signature scheme called Taurus, which is superior to the Frost scheme from Blockstream for true self-custody. And finally, what we wanted to do is have this as the bedrock for actual scalable and verifiable AI ops using native sats. So the focus areas that we have thought of, obviously, at the inception of this group are the following, which I'll be sharing with you. But I want all of you then to come in and, with your own point of view, see which of those you can tackle or your org can tackle, because definitely we need research leadership. We need not only startups and R&D folks, but we also need other sorts of industry leaders to bring in people from the traditional AI ecosystem back to here, right? So that's really important for us to know. The first research stream that we're looking at is this. How do we first have a sovereign end-to-end architecture for an AI agentic onboarding and deboarding of Bitcoin? So that means that we have to define standards for these agents so that they have full self-custody. Because again, we're looking at this right now from the very myopic lens of 2025, but by 2030, like, the world will be unrecognizable. And I, with a very silly early estimate, assume that if there are X trillion transactions happening due to human intervention on the planet right now, there might be at least 1,000 to 1 trillion X of those happening from agent to agent or agent to human or machine to machine by 2030. So what that would mean is that not only AGI, but ASI would require the rails where they can see that we have the hardest money, which is the most, I would say, secure decentralized ledger on the planet. But we also have the capability to have full self-custody of the assets on that network, which is Bitcoin. And that means the following are obviously not a complete list, but will be needed to be built out. So just looking at this, I want anyone to just like raise their hands if you want to explore more of any of these things, or if you are already part of groups who are building this, maybe if not on Bitcoin, but somewhere else. But something we're looking at is, of course, full UTXO compatibility for not only wallets, but smart contracts and self-custody on Bitcoin. So Tachi on one side has solved the self-custody onboarding problem with our signature scheme, but there are many other important primitives that haven't been built out. We might think that, okay, fine, it's easy because you can just take what's built out on account-based blockchains like the EVM-based blockchains and then just kind of port it over there. But that doesn't really solve it because at the end of the day, UTXO model is very different from the account-based models of Ethereum and other blockchains. And finally, how do you have fail-safe mechanisms? Because agents will become hedge funds, will become companies and economies on their own. So they would need fail-safe mechanisms, unilateral exit rights, and more. So Delhi, yeah, if you have anything to share on this, would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's very well put. The one that immediately jumps out to me is the on-chain identity via DID. And so this is an area I've been doing a huge amount of work on for a number of years. So, you know, identity really is the key to everything, literally, in the Web3 space. We all operate through private public keys, which serve as identifiers. And DIDs are a great framework, obviously developed by W3C, and they deal very well with sovereignty around identity. The challenge, though, with the DID model as it exists currently is that they're essentially pseudonymous. And the pseudonymity is good, but it's actually, for starters, you have legal complications with pseudonymous identifiers. So GDPR, for example, requires that pseudonymous identity is fully compliant with GDPR, which is just it's like an unstoppable force and immovable object when it comes to decentralized systems where everything's immutable in that sense. So you can't really have privacy online on one hand without having anonymity. And by the same token, you have regimes like MiCA, which and AML, KYC, which require full verification. So we've basically developed a framework that builds on DIDs using the IQ protocol, where essentially what we managed to do is establish anonymity at the network level and identifiability at the application or agent level in that sense. And even for humans, that's critically important in terms of having a robust privacy enabling but compliant enabling framework as well. But that's just going to become so much more complicated when you bring agents into the picture. Who owns the agent? Who are the agent's account? Where is the accountability with the agents? And how do you protect those polarizing needs of privacy on one hand with identifiability on the other? So that's, I mean, I won't go into dive into the details at this stage. Happy to talk about it ad nauseum. Our protocol's an open source framework. But yeah, that's an area that I'd be really keen to get involved in and facilitate.
Amazing, yeah. We were actually looking for some people who really put the charge in that side because it's one of the hardest problems to solve. And it's a key primitive on which everything else is built. So I'm glad you're doing that. Anyone has any other thoughts on maybe smart contracts or wallets or other inheritance protocols or even other aspects of the sovereign agent architecture that we haven't considered here? Because we'd love to add that because I'll get to what we're trying to deliver as a group later, but we want to create an industry level framework that different builders can cohesively build towards, right? And then so we have rapid onboarding of builders and actual protocols that come together and go live on mainnet. That's the whole point. right? We're not here to just write white papers. We're here to go live on mainnet and make Bitcoin work.
So, FYI, Logan Galima from Eliza, he's got a project called AIR, which is online inheritance.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. What we'll do is after this, we'll open up the Google Working Doc to everyone, and then we'll tag folks to come in and put specific links and next steps. Right? I think that's great because we want to make this get momentum and actually drive results. That's excellent. So the next thing that I want to talk about is, of course, the native machine economy on its own, right? So once you have the primitives in place for sovereign agent architectures using Bitcoin, you then have to create the actual SDKs and APIs, and finally the dApps that actually run and allow agents to have, let's say, MCP level control of not only their wallets, but to be able to trigger intent and to trigger smart contract transactions across all of these different dApps that will proliferate both on Bitcoin and on other chains. So think of Bitcoin as not only a source of truth for, let's say, things like DID and final settlement, but also the final ledger of settlement, right, for large-scale global economies. And that's only possible if these things are actually built on BTC, right? So high-frequency data and compute markets, right, having actual agentic compatible payment rails. So we're not talking about something basic like Lightning. We have to have something very, very configurable and programmable payments, right? So Tachi's, by the way, working on that. And something like what we've built called SatVM, which is allowing agent state and agreements and updates to be encoded directly onto Satoshis. So this is one of the things we're really proud of, having the ability to crack. But again, this is just a substrate for actual compute markets to be built. So again, anyone has any ideas or any projects that they're working on or working with who can come in, who might have solved this or trying to solve this elsewhere, and we can bring them onto Bitcoin if they get the programmable substrate. Yeah, Pranjal, you gave a thumbs up. Anything you can share about that? Like, you have any ideas of how you can bring that from your EVM experience?
Yeah, so we are experimenting on the liquidity management side, AI driven, where agents manage the liquidity and generate yield. But yeah, all our experiments mainly have been on the EVM side. I'm happy to collaborate and explore more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what we have to say. Right? The whole point of DAI is that you're bringing builders not only from Web3, but that means that the multiple like EVM, SVM, and now Bitcoin developers. But you're also trying to bring, I would say, Web2, AI, R&D, and HFT firms and others eventually. I want the biggest TradFi experiments turning into the biggest TradFi use cases to be powered by BTC natively, right? So that's going to be a long slog, but we want to be in the state where we can say that, hey, at least we have an MCP level integration for payments, for micropayment transaction, for programmable payments on BTC. So that's something that I'm very happy to work on with you guys. The final thing is, yeah, Albert, yeah, go ahead.
Previous page. If you go, yeah, this one says,
yeah.
We will research how to build and scale agentic marketplaces directly on Bitcoin. What's the advantage of putting these agentic marketplaces directly on Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah. So there are two levels. So one is allowing agents to control their own wallets so that they can directly settle in sats. That's one level of the marketplace. The other level of the marketplace is them being able to have matching or sophisticated, let's say, intents, right, directly on BTC instead of them having to only rely on, let's say I'm an agent, I am on BTC, I have control of BTC wallet, but if I'm not able to fulfill the complete intent lifecycle on BTC, I'm basically giving up control and custody of my BTC, let's say by sending it to an intent to wrap it to WBTC, to send it to an EVM-based agentic marketplace or a solver to then either bring it back or leave it wrapped. So that doesn't complete the entire cycle. So that's why we ideally at the end state should have it directly on BTC. So that full settlement and intent solving is done directly on mainnet.
Parth, is it fair to say if we are able to achieve this, then we will lock additional liquidity, which is currently, people are not deploying it because, the wrapping and all the challenges we have seen in past. Do you think this will open up a new liquidity in this entire space?
Absolutely. That's one of the key focus areas of why we built Tachi, is that we found that it's really embarrassing as an industry, right? More than 360,000 BTC is wrapped up in alt L1s and L2s. And less than 1/10 of it is used natively by either L2s or these LST protocols on Bitcoin. It's a sad state of affairs. So we have to unlock not only the 13 to 15 billion of WBTC, which is a tiny speck, but the up to 2 trillion worth of currently cold held Bitcoin, right? So we have to give those sovereign rails so that large scale wallets feel comfortable transacting on and using their Bitcoin. So I think this is the best way to get that, like you said. Oh yeah, Dr. Adel.
To the control over the wallet, one of my projects called Horace Wallet uses social account abstraction. So it is geared more towards Web2 users, but it would be interesting to see if instead of a Web2 user, we gear it towards a Web2 AI agent. So the AI agent might not know anything about blockchain per se, but it can access and manage their wallet and their tokens via the API as if it's interacting with a regular Web2 system. That's one thing that I was thinking of. And then earlier to Dale's point around figuring out what frame, one of my earlier paper research work was calling for constitution, called artificial constitution, because we are reaching a point where AI is going to pass the personhood test legally, which means that whether it is sentient or not, it is considered a person. So, so in that aspect, we need to be proactive as an industry and call for some sort of a constitutional framework that will then can be used to create legislation that will organize the relationships not only between human, AI, human, but also AI, meaning if one AI misleads another AI, that misleads a human who's at fault, and so forth. If we don't do that, we trying to catch up with PICA and others, kind of like where the legislators themselves may not have the full understanding and may come up with rules that are not conducive of our efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't catch some of it, but yes, let's follow up on that. Especially, you can add the name of the company once we have the Google Doc shared with all of you guys. It's actually in your calendar invites as well. Would love to, bring them on to the call as well. Oh yeah, Dilly, I saw that you had your hand up, and then Sai.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're going to cover this yet. The one looming threat, the elephant in the room to the supremacy of Bitcoin long term here is quantum and quantum resistance in that sense. And I feel that that's definitely something that we should definitely bring into this group as well. I know, David Chom as well has been working on that. And that threat is a lot more urgent than people think it is. And,
Absolutely.
it's definitely something that's very pressing, and that I'm sure I know that Tachi's looking at quantum resistance in and of itself. But it's a bigger problem across the whole ecosystem, and it's we need quantum resistance across the entire Bitcoin ecosystem in order for it then not to be you're as strong as your weakest link, no pun intended, right? So that definitely feels like another area that we need to take a look at and maybe get David involved.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you said that. So we're obviously Hitachi is part of the Quantum Roundtable with David Chom and others like Marathon and others. So what we found is that our chief scientist, Pumpkin, he's actually helping to contribute to BIP 360, by the way. So BIP 360 from Hunter and those folks is, I think, currently one of the better approaches towards solving this on a open, possibly acceptable level, because the main problem is coordination. Right? The main problem, especially for Bitcoin, is coordination and having nodes update to a better state of, Bitcoin Core, which implements these post-quantum improvement proposals. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for us. But yes, obviously, if we don't solve it, we're SOA, right? So that's what we have to do. Absolutely. Yeah. Side.
It's a good point you make, actually, that agents could be the means that we proliferate this quantum resistance across Bitcoin, actually.
Yeah. Later, I think I'll take you through how we want to make runtimes on Hitachi as live canary testnets with live BTC with pre-activated BIPs, so that you're having a forward-looking release candidate of Bitcoin with real live Bitcoin on the line. And then we bring in top ETF issuers, top miners, and top holders to say, hey, put your at least 100K BTC on the line with this BIP approach, and then let the world hack away at it, right? And that's, I think, a faster way to prove it in production, because that's unfortunately the only way it will work with Bitcoin. You have to prove it in prod. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else here? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next topic that I'm really excited about. Yeah.
Part what I want to ask you, is it possible to have a DEX on Bitcoin chain?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there are different hacks to make it happen. So people have tried, hacks with on top of ordinals and BitVM to make it possible on L1 itself. Again, the main problem is always going to be the problem of how much metadata can you cram back, and the block limit and the block time. So that's why the best approach in our way is to virtualize Satoshis and have a cryptographic guarantee proven transparently, just like how Lightning is able to solve it, but solve it generally for any programmable update to a UT. So, and that's what we've been working away at for the last 1.5 years. Awesome. Getting to this part, I'm really excited to hear everyone's thoughts on this. So we have the substrate, let's say, we have some of the key primitives, let's say, and then we have some of the critical use cases starting to emerge. But more importantly, the whole point of why, like Albert asked, like why do anything on BTC? It's working fine on ETH, right? It's working fine on Solana, or BitTensor, but not really when you really consider this. Right? The whole point is that you want to have proof of intelligence eventually anchored to the state of truth on the Bitcoin ledger, because that is a different proof and a different level of, I would say, source of truth and finality than anywhere else. I think that's the core of why Bitcoin is Bitcoin. And to do that, we then need to create all of these different guardrails and also auditable on-chain tooling. Because if we don't have that, AI agents will have smart contracts built on Bitcoin at some point through the technologies like Hitachi, but you will not be able to trace the complete source of truth unless you have a new form of ZKML or OPML proof, which allows you to transparently open up whatever happened to every single UTXO from start to finish, whether it's a human or an agent wallet doing it. So this is really important for us to solve. And of course, the whole point is we want to have this to be obviously as a registry as well. Like Dele said, right? You want to make any developer be able to harness this eventually. There are obviously challenges with immutable registries on blockchains, right? It's not the same as SQL database. It's not as clean, but there are ways to do this. I mean, we've done this on Ethereum and some of the altcoins as well. So this is something I'm really excited for you guys to understand. Any thoughts on this? Otherwise, we'll get into what we want to do from the subgroups perspective. All right, so moving on. What we were looking at is we can't deal with everything at once, right? We are starting really, really early stage as an industry and as a group of people here. So we have to go step by step. The first step, I believe, is having a foundational report and a framework about, first of all, why Bitcoin security matters for AI agents, why the UTXO model matters, what are its downsides, and also why is it differentially better than account-based models for specific guarantees and specific parallelism. And finally, why self-custody matters in the first place. Why can't you just do everything on ETH with WBTC, right? And just call it a day and don't worry about Bitcoin, right? So why this matters is very important because that sets the stage for the core thesis and the model for agent self-custody. Of course, from that, then we have to see what needs to be built out, which is the landscape analysis, which is we want to now onboard at least 100 to 200 different teams and projects at this stage, which will take probably a couple of months, to say that, hey, we're probably building out this tooling maybe on Web 2, right? We're building this out for the likes of, Anthropic or others, and we're looking at, hey, we want an MCP connect to BTC. That might be one. The other could be teams working on other ecosystems like the Ethereum, Cosmos, or Solana ecosystems, and where they can also come in and bring in the necessarily missing tooling. There are many base layer gaps, obviously. The state of BTC native SDKs for all of this is appalling. It doesn't exist, basically. So there's a lot of work to first identify this, and in the process, I am assuming a lot of future unicorns will be identified as well. Finally, we want to get to a proof of concept at some place. So first, a design proposal for a WASM-based or even an EVM to UTXO translation layer-based marketplace, which uses DKML proofs or OPML proofs to then show how UTXO updates can be made by actions or smart contracts triggered by agents themselves, and how those updated proofs can be settled back onto Bitcoin mainnet on every single block. So an auditable AI marketplace on BTC. This is just an early stage, I would say step-by-step R&D avenue that we've thought of, but obviously we want all of you guys to come in and hone this together. So would love your guys' input. Let's stop here for a couple of minutes. Who has some thoughts here? And where else do you think we can, change or update this? Or also, have you guys worked with, or are you funding or working on projects which might be able to be used here in BTC, but they might be doing this elsewhere? Yeah, Delhi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, definitely yes. I feel like the plan and framework is pretty robust and pretty solid. So yeah, I think it's really getting into it now. But definitely, I'm very keen to really embed iCube as kind of part of the framework on Tachi as part of this research process. So I have some research resources that I've got some. I work closely with Lehigh University, assessing. We have a proof of risk framework that we're developing that I think would lend itself to it. Because again, it's really what we're talking about here with all of these things is de-risking. It's de-risking transactions, de-risking operations. So I think that's, I'd be happy to contribute there.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. We're also thinking of, okay, what kind of MCP integration makes sense to implement on a Bitcoin programmability substrate? Not everything makes sense. We start off with maybe just, hey, triggerable micropayments. That's maybe level 0 of an MCP API integration. What could be level 1? Maybe do you have any thoughts? What else we should be focusing on?
Well, I think micropayments is actually the real whole shooting match, really, when it comes to agentic AI. I think we've reached peak AI subscription already.
Tell me about it.
Kind of getting ridiculous. So I think the inevitability of micropayments, particularly in agent-to-agent commerce, is key. So that really unleashes a whole world of liquidity. And also, you know, I really the dust problem is something that this really kind of it's almost like you could spin it as a bit of an eco-friendly approach to Bitcoin transactions in that sense. You eliminate dust actually now becomes a really valuable kind of building base, like a you know, a primal glue effectively that you can start to build off of. So you know, I think microtransactions, you know, if you've got all the other stuff we're talking about in terms of identity management, auditability, traceability, and you can do that at the Satoshi level, then really, you know, that's the foundation upon which everything becomes possible.
That's right. Absolutely. No, really glad you're here, and would love to jam with you later on a call with this. Yeah. Awesome. So before we close off the call, I'm really glad, by the way, loved everyone's contributions. And I think what we'll do after this is let you guys have actual written down inputs so that we integrate it into our working doc. And then we have actual tangible next steps. But before we sign off, I wanted to quickly take you through why we created this research topic, because we found that a key set of breakthroughs were possible on BTC to allow AI agentic, not only microtransactions, but sovereign agentic workflows to be possible directly with BTC. So quickly taking you through the R&D that's gone into this, and all of these will be FOSS, fully open sourced. So any team on the planet should be able to build on Bitcoin. And that also means that these building blocks would be used in Frankenstein ways across 1,000 different projects, hopefully, by the time we're done. So I told you about the first problem, which is that as an agent or as an agentic operator, you want to have fully sovereign and self-custodial onboarding of your BTC into any off-chain computation that happens. We've also established that some off-chain computation has to happen, like Lightning is off-chain computation, right? L2s are off-chain computation. But how do you maintain unilateral exit rights? How do you maintain sovereignty? So we've created something called Taurus. We have a white paper out for that as well, which addresses privacy and accountability and goes beyond what most L2s use today, which is Blockstream's Trust. And it removes bridging or pegging risks. So that's really important. That means that you guys are doing an agreement on BTC, either the agent and the substrate or the agent operator. Then, of course, you need a modular runtime because we want WASM code updating the state of sats at some point. But step by step, we wanted to create something called SatVM, and we finally achieved that, which is a unique UTXO translation runtime, which updates the UTXO state for every update to every smart contract interaction and every account interaction. So that means we can have things like Ethermint running on top of SatVM so that you have EVM-based smart contracts manipulating Satoshis. Solana VM to Satoshis. And finally, custom WASM implementations to Satoshis without having the massive issue of re-architecting everything to a UTXO model, which is really tough, right? And then you are forced to use hacks like BitVM, which really aren't what you want to do. You don't want to get into the bridging issues of BitVM. Finally, we created 2 new proof mechanisms to allow SatVM to transparently update these UTXO changes without creating a separate chain. So we took a lot of inspiration from the guys who created Lightning. So, you know, PJ Dredger, before he created Lightning, he created a UTXO, and that was the kind of the inspiration for our hash accumulated transaction proofs. And similarly, bullet proofs, which they created at MIT, was the inspiration for the recursive inclusion proof. So we, of course, changed the model and extended it so that you have any update to any UTXO is fully cryptographically verified, so that you have fast finality. So up to even sub-second finality in the future for any off-chain update to UTXOs without requiring a separate chain and without requiring a bridge. So this is, I think, a key part of what will enable everything we've been talking about. So really excited to talk more about this with you guys. And of course, we have like details about how, for example, Taurus works versus Frost versus federations like Liquid, and versus the whole L2 and WPDC ecosystem. SAT VM, the actual flow of how Satoshis are virtualized and available to be used on these execution layers, which then have transparent cryptographic proofs were aggregated back into every single block as an output UTXO in a Merkleized tree format, right? So that's kind of what we're doing. But we wanted to really look at, from a research angle, where others can use this. And that's kind of the impetus for us to shepherd this, because we felt that this is too big for just one team to use. We want everyone to work on this with us. We obviously have detailed white papers of this, and we're implementing this as we speak. Finally, how we want to run this group is we want to have at least 2 calls a month, right? And we want to have this as a research-based, research-dense, and open discussion-based call. What we'll use is we'll use a working Google Doc so that everyone can add in specific links to their GitHub repos, their projects, and also next steps. And of course, everything we build and that comes out of this has to be fully open source. So every framework, every report, and every proof of concept, and finally every DApp should be open source. That's a mandate from us, and I think a mandate from everyone who joins this group, because this is Bitcoin at the end of the day, right? This is not a VC-backed L1, right? This is the OG. So please come on board. I'm happy to invite all your fellow researchers, founders, VCs, and GPs who actually want to help build the future of Bitcoin powered AI. So that's it from me. Would love to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, we'll sign off and see you guys in a couple of weeks. Please do join the Telegram subgroup. That's really important because that's going to be where we all discuss and share the links of the cadence and the updates. So I will share that in a post call email, but also I will share that as a set of updates in the working doc. So really excited to welcome you guys. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.